Hello, this is Gabe Matthews for Polyplane.com. Thanks for coming back to continue on with the Intro to Rendering series. As you can tell, I've recovered my voice, so thanks for your patience. Let's talk about lighting. Lighting usually refers to the source or sources of simulated illumination in the scene. The lighting can come from various types of lights, including but not limited to ambient lights, including global illumination, spotlights, point lights, and directional lights. Before getting into specifics, there's a few settings we should talk about. Like when modeling, your rendering will have a global scale. This goes for environment, lighting, material, etc. This is particularly important to lighting as the bulbs in your scene use the same global numbers, so 1 equals 1. So 1 watt is the same scale regardless of if you're working in 1 millimeter or 1 mile. This is something to keep in consideration. Also, lights can be adjusted for not only brightness, but color, shadow type, fall off, and lots of other settings. Here we're going to focus on mainly the brightness and the visibility. You can have lights that are on in the scene, but with things like directional lights, you can have them cast light but be invisible. This helps light up areas that are walled off from globally illuminated areas such as closets or small rooms or anything really that's walled off. So let's talk about this first type of light, which is ambient light. The most common example of ambient light that I can think of is to go outside on a cloudy day and notice how there really aren't too many distinct shadows. This is because the light is bouncing all over the place and using the clouds as sort of a bounce card. This is a great example of ambient lighting. When you add ambient lighting to your scene, it is like adding a general brightness to your scene so you can see what's going on. This works as a great base light to set moods and tones. In most rendering software packages, the most common ambient light is called global illumination. This is the light that comes from everywhere and can be set to match specific color temperatures, or you can even map on HDRI images to create sort of a simulated scene. And we'll get into HDR light in a minute. In this example, as well as others in this video, I've got a cube in the scene. In this rendering, the global illumination is the only light in the scene, and it makes it so you can see the general subject matter within the render space. Rarely will you render a scene with just ambient light. You can, but I don't recommend it. This is more to fill the space with light than to be used as your primary illumination source. The next type of lights are spotlights. Spotlights are what the name suggests. They're a subject-specific light that can be generally used to illuminate a particular area within the rendering space. Both the focus and the fall-off can be typically controlled dynamically or numerically depending on the settings of the scene, and will cast harder or softer shadows than directional or point lights. And it depends on the distance the light source occurs from the scene. In this example, you can see that the light is focused on the center of the cube. Based on the shadow, you can make a determination that the light is likely to the left and above the cube. The cone in this particular spotlight has a hard fall-off area between where the light region is and where it falls off into space. Also, on a side note to that, the render settings in this particular render, I turned soft shadows off so that you could really see a very distinct area of where this spotlight was in space. If soft shadows were turned on, that shadow wouldn't be nearly as chiseled as it is. It would actually have a little bit of feathering as it went off into space. The next type of light is a point light. These lights have a single point of origin in space and cast light out in all directions from that point. Like the other lights, the brightness as well as the color can be controlled, and these work wonderfully in conjunction with lamps or other modeled sources of light in the scene to create a compelling atmosphere in the render. In the rendering shown, you can tell that the light is originating from the point shortly away from the center of the cube's front face. When using these lights, it can be tempting to use them as the ambient light source, but avoid this if possible, as the shadows tend to be a little more distinct. But if that's the look you're going for, knock yourself out. Let's talk about directional lights. As I said in the beginning of this video, you can have types of lights that can cast light but be invisible to the camera, or you can have them turned on. You might want to have the light turned on if you're trying to have reflections of the lights appear in the surface of your model if you're using a shiny material. And so it kind of just creates a little more interest in that sense, but it's also great as a fill light. Directional lights can be used as a primary light source to add a little bit more drama and a little more dynamic lighting condition to your scene as well. This type of light is also great for helping illuminate areas that are walled off from globally illuminated areas such as closets or other closed off rooms, as I said before. I tend to use this type of light the most in my renders as I feel it offers the most flexibility in both size and the finish of, say, the shadows. So this is what I was talking about. In this case, the fall off is much wider than it is with the spotlight, and you can see the shadows are much softer. Granted, I have soft shadows turned on, but even in that case, they're much softer than they would be with the spotlight. So it's a great fill light. I use it a lot for lamps as well. There are plenty of other types of lighting circumstances that can be employed in your renders. Things like HDRI, high dynamic range images, can be used as a virtual sky for both lighting and compositing by turning the image into a light map based on the colors in the image, and then that'll project into your scene as sort of a light source. And this can be used for making really compelling, realistic looking renderings. And then shown here, IES lights provide physically accurate spread of light that can be used for architectural renderings to simulate actual light bulb brands. And I've got a couple links here of where you can download some free IES lights and mess around with them in Rhino or whatever software you're using. Most software will recognize IES lights. To avoid having to render the lights over and over to see what sort of results you're going to get, there's a free light viewer, and this link is below as well at photometricviewer.com. And you can check out all the different kinds. Just search for IES lights on Google and you'll come up with all sorts of cool results. And you can even build your own in some cases. In the rendering demo at the end of this series, I'm going to use an HDRI backdrop to render the scene in KeyShot and V-Ray. And the next video in the series, we're going to cover the objects in the scene themselves and how to do a little bit of optimization to keep your model space moving fluidly. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day, and stay tuned.